And welcome to this week's episode of Written Undead podcast. We are so glad that you were able to show up. I'm Jen. This is Richard Ryan Rose. We have our amazing debonair Jack Childress with his awesome beard. And today, our guest, I'm like stalker fan level, Max Hawthorne, my hero, author of Chronos Rising and a bunch of other books, but those are the ones I read. So, Max, thank you so much for coming. I am so excited to have you on the show today.
As Benny Hill would say, it is an honor and a privilege.
I've been fangirling since you decided to show up and I haven't stopped talking about it. So it's been really awesome. I really appreciate it. And I guess you have multiple books out there, not just the Chronos Rising and the Diablo and the Plague and all and the Kraken and all that, but you also have um, a Myth and Mysteries, Water Myth and Mysteries book. Which one is that?
Monsters and Marine Mysteries.
Monsters and Marine Mysteries. And that one, from what I gather, has to do with some real life experiences, yes?
Yeah, it was a combination of, like, I always did a lot of research for my novels, so I
Mhm.
encountered more and more sightings, information, etc., that I would reference. There are sightings of a personal nature, things that I've encountered in the wild and in unexpected places that should not be there. Kind of throws off your reality check a little bit or whatever. It makes your reality check bounce, I guess would be a good term.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And also, I got to interview a lot of people that have had sightings of incredible marine cryptids and such, most of whom people don't even know they're still alive. I mean, it was like some of them are classical sightings and the details are wrong. So I spoke to the sources and I got the right information. You know what I mean? Like stories get told and retold and retold. And along the way, details get lost, changed, he said, she said, whatever. I got great stuff. And it was an honor to talk to people someone who's seen a 40-foot turtle, for example, or
Oh my gosh, I
a
can't even
Southside
imagine.
sea monster that tried to eat him and his father in their boat, all this stuff. It was just great.
I can't even imagine. Now, in your Chronos Rising and Chronos series, you have quite a few, and I don't know if anyone else has read them. I have. It's been a few years since I've read them, but you have quite a few characters in there that I just absolutely fell in love with. Jack, Sheriff, or I'm sorry, Sheriff Jake. He
Jake
had,
Braddock.
yeah. Where did you base his characters off of? And then even further down the road, he had a couple of sons himself. Garm and Dirk, and names and just places and how much of this is based off reality, based off of people that you personally know? How much of this is just, real life stuff? Or was it just something that you were like, I think Jake Braddock is a great name and I'm going to create a character and he's going to be a recovering alcoholic sheriff?
Okay, that's a lot of questions.
I
So let me
know, all
see.
at once. I'm
Gonna
sorry. I'm so
try and
excited.
gotta try and eat this elephant one bite at a time, as the saying goes. Okay, so Jake's character, the inspiration for his character on a like a extreme basis, just really the most basic impetus, I guess you'd say, is I have an uncle named Paul who is a retired attorney. He was in the Vietnam War. He was decorated hero from there, but he was also the national saber champion. Fencing. He was the
Okay.
captain of NYU's fencing team. And the year that the U.S. boycotted the Olympics in Russia, he was
Mhm.
supposed to go there to compete for a medal, for the United States, but he was denied that chance. See,
Man.
so he was the basic, I guess you'd say, sort of, like motivation for the character Jake, because there's some parallels there. Jake dropped out of going to the Olympics because his wife had
Mhm.
died and things of that nature.
Yes.
My uncle's not a recovering alcoholic. Right? I don't even know if he's an alcoholic. I mean, I'm assuming he's not. So, but the rest of it though, I just kind of like made up as I went along and whatnot.
Mhm.
I had him because I needed a character that was, everybody has to have their sad backstory, you
Yeah.
know. And then
Yep.
you've got this guy who was this athlete who had the world at his feet. He had this beautiful wife. They did all these adventures together. She dies in a free diving accident, and he just spirals into despair. Gives up
Yeah.
his career, running around, just drinking and whatever. And he
Hmm.
ends up being offered this job as a name. He's
Yes.
useful for somebody in his hometown, so he takes a position. That position helps, though, to save him because he
Yes.
causes him to give up drinking, and he
Yes.
replaces his lost love with his love for the people of the town and protecting them from everything he possibly can. And he
Hmm.
takes no crap from nobody. He's a big, dangerous guy in his own right, etc. But then this creature comes along, this pliosaur that has escaped from Diablo Caldera, a 66 million-year-old
Yes.
carnivorous marine reptile is on the loose, and it is working its way up the Floridian coast and doing what apex predators do when they enter a new environment. Am I the biggest and baddest around? Looks that way. I'm taking over this place. And it's not afraid of boats or
Okay.
motors or people or whales. Everything in its way is prey. And when it
Okay.
gets, attacked, etc., it retaliates, and this ongoing thing goes on. And along the way, Jake meets Amara Takagi,
Yes.
who, after him being alone for the last 3 years since his wife died, is possibly reignites the spark of romance that's been missing from his life all that time. But that remains to be seen over the course of the book. But that's where he goes. Oh, and the name Jake Braddock is because my dad had actually met Jim Braddock, the world champion boxer, back when he was in high school. My
Okay.
my dad used to box in the boxing team there and in the army, and so when he was at this exhibit, Jim Braddock was there to talk to the school and to discuss his fight with Joe Louis, and he was sitting right next to my dad, who he described as he was a big scary guy or whatever, but and then so you put all these things together, that's kind of inspires the character. It all comes from somewhere normally.
Right. That is. It's so sweet.
And
It
you need
really
the
is.
Garm and Dirk thing also.
Yeah, Garmin Dirk. Now, where did those names come from? I mean, because I know they're in book two. Yeah.
Right, 30 years later.
And yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, they're in book two, and they're Jake's sons,
Hmm.
and a whole new set of issues pops up with that.
Right.
Kind of like there was in particular this one part in the book where Dirk is entering into this huge laboratory, for lack of a better term,
Tartarus,
Tartarus.
the research facility, where they
Yes,
experiment on the pliosaurs and
where
then put
there's
cybernetic implants in them to turn them into weapons and use them to
yes,
take out naval vessels and stuff like that.
yeah. I wasn't trying to give too much of it away, but okay. So
Spoilers.
Dirk, he's like he's getting there for the first time, and he's checking things out, and he's looking around, and he sees in one of the water pods where they've released a fish. I think it's called a mola.
Mola
I've
mola.
never mola
Yeah,
mola. I've
ocean
never seen
sunfish.
them. Know nothing about them. Um, but they released it in with the Chronosaurus,
Hmm.
and he's watching it, and he's watching how he's expecting the Kronos to go the big mama. What was her name? Tiamat.
Oh, oh, no, that's not Tiamat. I know the scene you're talking about. That was
Okay.
one of the regular pliosaurs. Its name was Charybdis, based
Okay.
on Greek mythology.
Yes. So he's watching it, and like this particular fish, the plesiosaur is just like, no, I don't want nothing to do with it. He's actually giving it space.
Right.
And which is shocking because he's such a huge he was the apex. He is, especially in that little area. Um it was such an um amazingly worded scenario, an amazingly worded scene that I was like, this has to be real life. This has to be. So is this part real life? I mean, obviously without the dinosaurs. Have you had this is written from experience because it is worded so well.
Okay, so there's still like a bunch of questions. So Garm's name comes from Greek mythology, which is this giant wolf named Garm, which guarded the gates of Hades. if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken, if memory serves. Or that might be from Norse mythology. I might be missing it. It might be Norse mythology. I think it is. And that name was chosen because actually that is related to personal experience. My middle name is Enfield, Enfield, like the town in England. Okay.
Okay.
And that was my grandfather on my mother's side's first name, Enfield. And
Okay.
he got his name because his parents were arguing over what his name was going to be when he was an infant. And the father was fed up with the argument, and he just grabbed an outdoor magazine and he said, "You know what we're going to do?" He goes, "We're going to open this magazine, and I'm going to randomly open it and jam my finger on something, and whatever's there is his name." And he did that, and he hit this rifle called the Enfield. Oh, okay. True story.
So
Okay.
interesting.
And that was his name, which I have inherited as a middle name. So I thought, I'm going to have Jake and Amara have the same argument type thing, etc. And, because they were arguing, she wanted to name Dirk Dirk. Really, his name was Derek. Okay.
Mhm.
But she pinned the nickname Dirk on him anyway because his father was a swordsman and a dirk is a small sword, like a dagger. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what she came up. And since she was sort of like bypassing to that to do it anyway, so he was picking what the name was going to be, or it was either him or her. I forget which one was arguing. And they opened up a Greek mythology book or Norse mythology book, and boom, and Garm came from there. And that loaned itself to the character because he was a professional fighter, a boxer. So his
Yes.
nickname was the Gate, as in Garm the Gate, Braddock, guarding the gates of hell, that kind of thing.
He was
So,
a big boy in the book.
yes, he was. Is no spoilers. So what? Like Rich and Jack, do you guys know what a mola is? Like an ocean sunfish?
I can't say as I do. Of course, I'm
Oh,
not.
you guys
Yeah.
should Google it or put it up like for the recorded session if you can. It is considered to be by many the largest bony fish in the world, and it is repulsive looking. It looks like a swimming head with like a fin up top and a fin up the bottom. It is grotesque looking. It looks like something macabre from like I don't know, like hell, but it's not aggressive. It swims super slow at like 3 miles an hour. I think it feeds on either seaweed or plankton. I'm not even sure, to be honest. I don't know everything about everything like people think, but it's a very large fish. It can weigh 5,000 pounds.
Good Lord.
Not a small fish. Be like 15 feet long from nose to, it doesn't even have a tail. Its caudal fin is this atrophied thing. So it swims by undulating its dorsal fin and ventral fin that stick up like sails and a keel and just moving along. So you look at this thing, and I always thought, well, how does this thing even stay alive? I mean, it's like a swimming buffet, like a cooked turkey waiting to be eaten. Sharks should be all over this
Right.
thing. How has this thing survived for millions of years? So then from personal experience, I used to have, back when I was single, whatever, I used to keep a Goliath bird-eating spider as a pet. I know that sounds kind of nasty, but it's
Wow.
really low maintenance that I could feed once a week and be away and whatever. But this was like the largest species of tarantula in the world. It was literally this big. Okay, the size of a big dinner plate, 11 inches across. Her name was Grendel. She was a really evil, a heinous. Can I use the B word on the show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Heinous bitch. She tried to kill me 100 times, if once. I used to keep steel forceps, like 2 feet long, and long tweezers the same size, because whenever I went to go change her water dish, she would attack me, and I had to fight her off like a lion tamer.
Oh my God.
I mean, hissing, 1-inch black fangs, lunging. It was quite disconcerting. I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah. So, but the thing was, so Grendel, she used to eat mice and stuff. So one day I went to this like outdoor show or something like that, and they had these giant Cuban cockroaches there, hissing cockroaches. And I know cockroaches are disgusting, but they were more like beetles. They were this big and
Yeah.
armor plated. You had to see them.
Those I know.
Yeah, they're harmless. You can hold them in your hand, whatever. They're
Yeah.
slow moving like a tortoise and stuff.
But gross.
But they're not disgusting like water bugs and cockroaches like we have here. Okay. But I thought, wow, that's great. It's an arthropod like her. She might have encountered those in the wild or something similar. It's same price as a mouse, and I don't have to feel guilty. I said, I'll feed her this. So I got a couple of them, brought one home, put it in the tank with her. She had this like a artificial log that was like an arch shape, her cage that she would sit in. She came charging out. She touched it with her forelimbs. She went like this, and she went, and then she wouldn't touch it. And
Okay.
like ignored it. She backed away. She went back in her cave, turned around, and sat there. I come back 12 hours later, and now the roach has invaded Grendel's cave, and they're sitting side by side, facing the outside, as if they're roommates.
Oh,
He was forced to move over and give it space, and the two of them are now at the entrance side by side. I'm like, what are these guys, buddies now? Like, what the hell is going on here? You know? And
That's so interesting.
the only thing I could think of was the roach had such a repulsive odor to it, and the spider was spoiled. Like our Siberian forest cats are spoiled. Okay,
Yes.
they will only eat the good stuff. Okay, and she would not touch it at all. So
Wow.
I thought, if the mola mola is surviving great white sharks and everything else like that, Lord knows what else it's seen that's extinct now. It's been around for a long time. There must be something to it. So I thought I'll use this as a nice, reality point for, my pliosaurs, etc. So you've got these 100-foot high by 100 by 200, 400-foot fish tanks all lined up with these captive pliosaurs, these giant marine reptiles in there that would eat a great white shark. And you put this mola mola in there, this ocean sunfish, and the pliosaur won't touch it. She's like, get away, whatever. And then you leave it where the scientists, where Derek or Dirk is wondering, is it the flavor, the smell? Is it just so hideous that she's like repulsed by it? What could this be? And he's thinking maybe we can use this to our advantage. We could develop some sort of repellent to protect people from being attacked and eaten by pliosaurs. So everything is sort of interrelated in terms of the whole. When you do a book, you guys know you got to create a reality, a whole universe. And if you're going to have a research facility that experiments on and weaponizes these 150-ton monsters, you need to have some basis of reality research to go with that. So it's all part of achieving that suspension of disbelief, I guess you'd say.
well,
I love it.
so research time versus actual writing time. Which do you spend more time on?
That's a good question. I think my brain is so overflowing with information and bullshit, okay, these days, that I'm pretty well stocked up, but I always encounter things that I have to research. So when I'm writing, it depends on the day, but I usually spend about 3 to maybe 4 to 5 hours a day writing. 3 to 4 is normal, but that includes, we're talking writing 1,500 to 2,000 words. They're fully edited, polished, read through, polished, repolished, etc., and almost ready for the editor. And then they're done, But I'll encounter things that I have to research. Flicking Kraken 1, there was a character that was in there who was a truck driver. He drove a tractor trailer. Have either of you guys ever driven a tractor trailer?
No.
No.
Another friend of ours has.
Okay. Well, I've never been in one, and so I know nothing about tractor trailers. So, if you're going to write something like that, you have to, it needs to be real to the reader, because you're going to get some truckers going to be like, oh, that's bullshit. That's not how it works. That, whatever, something about the gearbox, who knows what it's going to be, and I'm going to look like an idiot. So I had to spend like 3 or 4 hours researching tractor trailers, models, technology, terminology, what goes with it, all this stuff, to put it all together so that this guy who drives around and lives in his rig, more or less, with all his troubles and troubled past and all that stuff, came across as real. So I had to do all that. Luckily, after that info dump into my brain, most of that gets lost, as soon as it's written, thank God, or after the book's done, but because you can't hold everything.
No, you can't.
So it's all part of, achieving that suspension of disbelief. It's lost, as soon as it's written, thank God, or after the book's done, but because you can't hold everything.
No, you can't.
So suspension of disbelief. It's lost, as soon as it's written.
What is going on?
I did nothing. I didn't touch anything. Okay.
You can't.
No. And I'm not time traveling.
That's funny.
Rich, what's going on, big guy?
That might have been my fault. Sorry about that.
Oh my God.
We were all just like, what happened?
No, at first, the first second or two, I was like, is there somebody else calling in?
Right. This would not be a normal podcast if we did not have a few technical issues ever.
And by the way, if you want me to read a couple pages from the new book, you just let me know. I have it handy if we need it. So
I would love it.
Thumbs ups on that.
Yeah.
Let's get that done.
Right now?
For me personally, I'm excited. I purchased your book and everything, the newer one that came out, the novella, what Chronos Rising Purgatory, yes?
Yes.
So
You remember the tagline at the bottom?
I do not.
I always come up with some obnoxious,
Clever.
corny tag. Well, they say clever. I think they're like embarrassing sometimes. But there was one for it said oh my gosh, I think it was Kraken 2, where it said if you can't beat them, eat them.
Oh,
Like that kind of stuff. I said a bad word.
you're fine. You could say a bad word.
Okay. But, you had this Megalon Shrug and this Pliosaur at odds with each other and stuff. Yeah. What does that say at the bottom?
Says at the bottom, Sun, Sand, and Slaughter. Book your timeshare now. I think that's great.
Now that one I liked.
That one was good.
Yeah, it was very
That one's
apropos
good.
for the story, especially given Jake's situation. So, all right. So if I'm going to read a couple pages, the only thing is I got to kind of give a tiny bit of background for this, but unfortunately, that's going to be Spoilerville. Jake's situation was like the Luke, no, I am your father Star Wars version, for these books. It's up at the end of Kraken too. But
Yes.
okay, so but there's no escaping it because if I read it, it's going to become obvious. So Jake basically has been infected with Pliosaur DNA. This disease called Cretaceous cancer that these creatures carried. But since they've been isolated for 66 million years in this caldera, people have been shielded from. And now this plague is starting to spread. And the same people that have been researching at Tartarus on pliosaurs have been trying to research this disease. They've been trying to weaponize it and trying to make their little super soldiers, as people were bound to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Jake has mutated beyond belief, and he's turned into this 7-foot monster that makes the Gill Man look like McGillicuddy or something. I don't know, whatever goes.
Like
whatever,
Gilligan.
Barney. Okay.
Yes.
Something like that. And he is this 7-foot, 400-pound, half man, half reptile killing machine with talons and superhuman strength. I mean, he could turn over a car very easily, etc. And so at the end of Kraken 3, his nemesis, this guy named Grayson, who owns everything, okay, and who murdered his wife and it wants to wipe out 99.99% of the people on the planet.
Yep.
The ultimate globalist, okay.
Yeah.
He has been fleeing Tartarus because the Kraken has invaded the place. That's a long story, and I don't want to diverge in so many plots. But and escaped in this mini sub called a Remora. The Remora, since he doesn't know how to operate it, oh, what a surprise! You own a company, but you don't know how to operate some of its products. He hits this button that's like an autopilot, which takes him back to its previous destination. As the sub starts to move along and leave the burning facility, he passes out from a head injury, et cetera, and all that. He wakes up in Diablo Caldera, this prehistoric land where the pliosaurs came from, etc. Worse than that, Jake, realizing he was going to try and escape on this thing, stowed aboard and reveals himself in dramatic fashion and is slowly but surely chasing Grayson down with the intention of killing him as horribly as possible, etc. But what happens at the end of Kraken 3 is that we discover that the caldera was used by Grayson and his people, fittingly enough for the situation, for him being there, where they would take all these cast-offs, these people they tried to turn into super soldiers that turned into these mutated things that were much less successful and insane than Jake is. So you got hundreds of these reptilian creatures roaming this island, starving to death because they're eating everything that exists on the island, that eat people and are just there. They're crazed killers, and they want to eat Jake now, as he discovers. So now he's stuck in his fight for survival against armies of these things. He's got Grayson with him. What does he do? You see what I'm saying? Does he let Grayson get ripped apart and eaten alive? Does he kill him himself? Or does he try and protect him so he can kill him later? It's a whole, immediately he's thrown into a meat grinder type of thing.
You do so well at that. You do so, that was, I think, part of that was like, it was M. Night Shyamalan me, because I was like, I never saw that coming when Jake revealed himself down in the cave.
You got to be as sneaky as possible.
Oh my God, you did so good. It was great. It was great.
Just like, but you have to hint at things, but so subtly that people would never associate it. And then when the reveal comes, they're like, oh, and then it all comes together for you.
Exactly what I did too.
Yeah, but Rich, if you were in a situation like that, where a guy who turned you into a mutated monster and imprisoned you in a dungeon for a decade, forced you to eat people by starving you, etc., and murdered your wife and all that, and you're now on this island, okay, and you've got the situation where you've got to fight to protect yourself, or you're going to be hamstrung by protecting this piece of that did all this stuff to you, but you'd rather keep him maybe alive so that you could kill him yourself in more dramatic fashion. What would you do? Would you let them have him? Would you try and keep him alive? Would you kill him real quick yourself? And then you know what I'm saying? Because it's it's a tough situation.
Okay, so, well, yeah, I mean, you're asking, would I keep the guy alive in the hopes that he could turn me back into a human?
No. Jake, his goal is to kill Grayson as slowly and painfully as possible, but his intentions are now disrupted when he discovers these mobs of these creatures in the jungle that are starting to come after them. He can hear them approaching. He's getting ready to fight. He's got weaponized shotguns. He's got this big sword he's been carrying and stuff, but he's one against hundreds possibly. So Grayson is there. He's got seconds, let's say, before these things are upon them. Does he say, well, you're a dead man, and cut his head off or cut him in half, okay, or something, rip his throat out, whatever? Does he leave Grayson to get eaten and watch from a distance and then have to worry about it surviving himself? Or does he throw Jason over his shoulder like a gunny sack and make a break for it, figuring, I'm going to protect this guy, and then when the time is right, I'm going to enjoy killing him myself? That kind of, I mean, those would basically be the three choices. You don't really have any.
I look at it this way: if you're being chased by a bear, you don't need to be the fastest person in the group. You just need to be faster than the slowest person in the group. So I'd leave the guy behind, so that'll occupy at least some of them.
Okay.
You were chasing after me, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what about you, Jack?
I'm kind of leaning towards what Rich said, but if I had a secondary answer to that, I would say I would try to keep him alive so I could toy with him later, especially if I'm some big hulking monster. I'm like, all right, knock you out, throw you to the side, deal with them, then get back to you afterwards. So if you like main course, dessert.
That's a heck of a main course. All right, so let's delve into this a little bit and see what we got. I got to start with chapter 1 here. You guys still see me because I just closed the screen up? Okay, good. Just making sure. I know we have some minor technical issues and stuff like that. All right, chapter 1. Wait, hold on. Let me wet my whistle for this. Got to get it.
First time we've had someone do this for us.
Okay. me.
Beautiful.
As if I was going to sing. I had a song out last Christmas that I sang, the Mafia version of Jingle Bells, but I'm not going to sing it here. Chapter 1. The creature just wouldn't die. Jake Braddock's broad chest rose and fell as he stalked toward it. A smoking Grayson Defense Technologies Cause shotgun gripped in one clawed hand. He paused just beyond reach of its flailing hands and feet, his maned head cocked to one side. He had to admit he was impressed with the reptilian's tenacity. He'd pinned it to the trunk of a tall cypress with his claymore shortly after the melee began. By his estimate, that was a good 7 minutes ago. Yet, despite hanging suspended in the air all that time, with a Scottish broadsword rammed through its chest, it stubbornly refused to give up the ghost. Actually, that was selling the thing short. Even mortally wounded, it was still game. Feral eyes ablaze, it uttered a non-stop string of adder-like hisses as it alternated lunging at him and clawing at the aged blade that was slowly but surely sapping its life. When the battle began, Jake had no time to size up his adversaries. They'd come at him in a rush. Before things picked up again, and if the hyena-like howls echoing in the distance were any indication, his respite would be brief. He decided to take a moment to scrutinize one of his opponents. His cobalt eyes narrowed as he studied the enraged reptile. It wasn't quite as big as him, probably half a head shorter, but at 6'6" and a solid 300 pounds, it was no lightweight. Despite being derived from similar stock, its appearance was markedly different. It had an unnatural look to it, as if it had been born prematurely and wasn't quite complete. Yeah, ugly didn't begin to describe it, he had to admit. As grotesque as he knew himself to be, when viewed up close, this creature made him feel downright handsome. The reptilian's head was hairless, with a flat face and a protruding Neanderthal-like brow ridge. Its dome-shaped cranium was comparatively small, suggesting a brain to match. Its jaw was broad with a receding chin that undershot a large mouth, filled to overflowing with piranha-like teeth not unlike his own. Its eyes interested him. They were the eyes of a madman. The whites were blood red, and there was no iris to speak of, just a dilated black pupil that glared at him with undisguised malice, and overshadowing that animosity was a ravening hunger. Its physique was rangy and, although obviously powerful, had an unbalanced look to it. Its traps were enormous, while its shoulders were comparatively narrow. Its upper arms were muscular, yet slim when compared to its massive forearms, both of which terminated in huge, gnarled hands tipped with the filthiest fingernails he'd ever seen. Spitting with rage, the reptilian attempted to lunge at him once more. It was so eager to get at the source of its ire, its thick-scaled feet were running in place, a foot above the forest floor. Its furiously grasping fingers, topped with those festering nails, came within inches of his face, and it continued to hiss at him for all it was worth. Pause for hydration. By the way, tell me when to stop. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm not going to touch it. Anyway, Jake felt his shoulders tense at the obvious challenge. He drew a breath and hissed back at it, so loudly that he swore he saw a glimmer of confusion in its scarlet orbs. The mystery of why the creature continued to remain alive began to irk him. Did it have regenerative abilities comparable to his own, or perhaps better? He turned toward Eric Grayson and threw him an interrogatory look. The battered CEO gave no sign of noticing. He remained where he'd been since the battle began, in a fetal position with his back to a nearby tree, hugging his enigmatic metal briefcase as if his life depended on it. Jake cocked a scaly brow. Perhaps it did. All of a sudden, it occurred to the former Olympian that the resiliency of Grayson's creation, Natalia Dragonova was undoubtedly right, they were all cast-offs from his experiments, was simply a matter of physics. The 8 others that he beheaded, cut in two, or shot in the face had all perished on the spot. All, that is, except the one he disemboweled. That one had been crawling over its own colon when he'd stomped its head, the same way he had that murderous mercenary back in Tartarus. A quick glance at the crimson rivulets falling from his antique blade to the rainforest floor confirmed Jake's suspicions. His claymore had, indeed, pierced the big reptilian's heart. But by pinning it to a tree, the blade was also plugging its wound, which meant that, to finish it off, all he had to do was be a good little Dutch boy and take his finger out of its metaphorical dike. Jake's own red-rimmed eyes met his foe's unblinkingly as he gripped the Scottish sword's handle. Then he wordlessly drew it free. There was a wet squelching sound. Then the creature's feet hit the ground with a thud. For a few seconds it remained where it was, hunched over and struggling to gain its bearings. He waited for it to fall down and die. But instead it snarled and stubbornly sprang to attack. To Jake's surprise, its target wasn't him. It was Grayson. His aged nemesis uttered a high-pitched bleat as he saw one of his Frankensteinian creations coming for him with murder in its eye. It was less than a yard away when Jake sprang forward and lopped off its head. The reptilian's body crashed to the ground, but its severed head continued on. Rolling, eyes over occipital. By the way, I invented that. I like that. Eyes. It landed right between Grayson's legs, its foaming jaws snapping at his crotch. The terrified scientist shuffled backwards like a frightened crab, a series of mewling noises spewing from his bloodied mouth.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah, stop. Oh my God, I'm so excited. It was so good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I
Thank you,
propose that you start getting in touch with all of us before our bedtimes each night and read us a little bit of the story.
And your voice is fabulous with it. That's what makes it. You've got that radio voice too. And like you could read your own books for the vocal, the audio. Oh my God, I was entranced. Thank you so much for reading
I'm
that.
hanging on that. I could see it. I could see the whole thing playing out in my head, and that's a big deal with me. If I can't automatically just off the words, even if someone's just reading it to me, if it doesn't make a movie inside my head, then something's not right. And that movie was playing in my head. Yeah. And even though like we've only got an hour to do a show, I was still like, just keep reading.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You guys are great.
It was amazing, and I cannot wait to finish that book. I'm definitely, and that's what pulled. I actually started reading your book after I had read all of the Megalodon books. I was really just jonesing for underwater crazy.
Jonesing. I like that.
and I was like, and I just happened to pick up your book. I was working at Books A Million at the time as a part-time job, and I was a cop. So I read a ton of books because I worked third shift watching inmates, and then I'm like, okay, so I'm done with the Megalodon series. Now I need more. And I found your books and I started reading them, and I actually started passing them around the jail too, to all my fellow COs. I was like, you got to read this. You got to read this, because it really it pulls you in. I actually at one point had to stop because I'm like, I'm getting too into this. I have to read this at home. I can't concentrate on my job because I'm so into this book. I used to get mad at people when they bother me. So if you have not read any of Max's books, you need to. It is a must do before you die, because this guy has every single type of underwater crazy creature in there. You even got a kraken.
Octopus gigantus.
Yes.
Two of them, a male and a female.
With babies. So it's a huge deal.
Acid. Don't forget the acid.
Yes.
What Jennifer just said about not being able to read it at work, she was so enthralled in it. For some reason, I'm picturing something that looks like this while she's reading the book, and you're just seeing the inmates walking out the door behind her.
Like people carrying, taking.
It was third shift. They were sleeping. Out. It was third shift. They were sleeping. It was more the COs that are like, "Hey, Jen, you want food?" I'm like, "I don't need to eat. Leave me alone." My precious.
And you're too into it. You start like snapping.
Yes. Get away. Get your hand away from me.
Yes. Sorry, I thought I was a pliosaur for a second there.
I got a question for you, Max.
Sure.
Okay, so you're writing about a lot of aquatic monsters. Do you ever write about, more land-based monsters by chance?
Besides Eric Grayson.
Well, I mean, you have in the last, let's see, starting at Kraken 2, we first were on the island. And so the first, I have human land-based monsters galore. Right. There are hordes of these like serial killers that work for Grayson as his security guards, etc., that are nightmares in their own way, but they're sort of human, meaning like except for their souls, let's say, and stuff. Mm-hmm. But when we got into the caldera, that's when things started. I started introducing terrestrial stuff. I have these raptors, like the raptors from Jurassic Park that they call velociraptors. They're really not, but different species. And I created raptors for Diablo Caldera that are unique in that they run on the surface of the water.
Yes.
Literally, like 50 miles an hour, like that.
It's so cool.
And, and like a basilisk lizard, but weighing 400 pounds and being 4 feet at the hip and stuff like that. And I evolved them so that they, based on the fact that they were trapped in the caldera after it was swamped, with the asteroid impact, with the tidal wave, they had most of their food with, there was limited forest there. Most of the caldera is this giant saltwater lake. So they had to learn to feed more and more on fish as opposed to other terrestrial creatures. And that meant that the raptors that working the edge of the water there, obviously the ones that can move the fastest through the water, and avoiding pliosaurs, bulldog fish, sharks, whatever else is in there, a lot of predators and stuff, would survive to pass on their genes. So the ones that had feet, that had scales that allowed them to push faster through the water in the shallows, were the ones that would pass on their genetics. And eventually got to the point where they could literally run on water. So now there's an actual breeding population of raptors in there that literally run like water striders across the surface of the water. Then we also have these reptilians that have been parachuted in there, dumped in there. So those are terrestrial predator as well. But I don't do a lot of land stuff yet.
Okay. Now, do you have any interest in like cryptozoology?
Well, I have that book out, Monsters and Marine Mysteries, so it's all in there. But I mean, I've seen a Bigfoot swimming. Literally.
You just spoke Richard's language.
Okay, now you're speaking my language, because I write about Sasquatches.
It's in Monsters and Marine Mysteries, the whole thing there. And, and my daughter and I encountered this winged creature back when she was 7 that is a fairy. We both saw it, plain as day, and I had an experience when I was 19 in a cemetery that I really don't want to talk about right now. But, yeah, if you want to talk about the Bigfoot thing, I mean, I can tell you about it real quick. Or,
yeah, you got my attention.
So this happened about 30 years ago. I was in like around 27, maybe 28, something like that. And my family, we used to have a house on the lake, Candlewood Lake in Connecticut, Danbury. I don't know if you guys have ever been up that way. It's a big lake. It's got like 50 miles of coastline, and it's a man-made lake, but it's been there for a long time. And so what happened is, this is before cell phones and things of that nature. You understand? Like we used to take pictures of the fish we caught with Polaroids back then and stuff. Like that, okay? Or if you had a disposable camera, maybe, or a 35 millimeter or whatever. So what happened is, it was me and 2 of my brothers, who we'll call Lenny and Squiggy for purposes of privacy. So Max, Lenny, and Squiggy, okay, we get up. It was still pitch black out, 5 in the morning, and we're going to go to the lake and we're going to fish. And our goal was, since we didn't have a boat at the time, we were going to drive to Squance Pond and fish what's called the causeway. So picture an enormous lake, and then a small portion of it has been separated from itself by a causeway that's been built, like a road that, can, I think only 1 car or maybe 2 cars can go through. I'm not even sure. I think maybe 1 way each way, or it might be you have to wait for the next guy. I don't remember. It's been so long. But anyway, it's built up with like rocks they piled up like this, and then built the road on top of it. But since the lakes are connected, there's a big concrete, I guess probably steel reinforced tube. It might be 6 feet across, that goes under the causeway, so the water can flow back and forth through, so animals can travel through, etc. Okay. So Squance Pond is like state land. It's a preserve, and it has houses on one side, but the rest all goes into the woods and the wild and everything like that kind of stuff. Okay. And which relates to what's coming. So when our goal was, we were going to go there, and if you think about it, so if you're on this causeway, you can sit on these rocks, which is probably 15 or 20 feet high vertically. I'd say 15 maybe going up, but you could sit on the rocks and fish on either side. So on one side, say the left side, you're fishing Squance. On the right side, you could fish Candlewood, even though it's the same. It's really part of Candlewood. Okay, just trying to set the stage. So we get there. It's still dark out. We set up. We have like live minnows and bobbers and buckets to sit on and whatnot. And unfortunately for us, we weren't good at checking the weather and forecast, and it had rained all the previous night. So what had happened is the lake was the color of tea or something like that. It was dark, really dark. Okay, which sucks for fishing. So we're not getting any bites, which doesn't make sense, because all these big rocks down there that go out, there are crayfish all over the place, peeking out, and smallies and largemouth will prowl around there and stuff like that. So you'd think you'd be getting them, but there was so little visibility, and the bobbers were higher up like not quite on the bottom. We just weren't getting anything, but we were just sitting there and waiting and waiting and waiting. So maybe an hour of nothing, Lenny and Squiggy decide they're going to go up, cross the causeway, and go the other side and fish the Candlewood side. I'm like, go ahead. And I'm thinking, haha, with them going, I'm going to hook a monster bass and they're going to be jealous. You know how kids, siblings, rivalry, whatever.
Yes.
So I got like 1 or 2 rods out there with my bobbers and nothing's happening. And I'm bored. It is literally, now I don't know what day of the week this was, but I know that the people that like work there, let's say it's like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, maybe at this point, like just barely like light out. Like a lot of them on the weekends will come out on the lake with jet skis, but they don't do it at 6 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning, maybe 9, 10, something like that. And they ruin your fishing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there was nobody out there and it was like glass, literally glass. It's a little bit of mist, but not a lot. You could see. So I'm sitting there and on my upside down bucket, and I see something pretty far out, like this dark thing. It's like a dark object, and then it disappears, and then it comes up again, like 30 seconds or a minute later, it disappears. And I'm looking, I'm like, what is that? I'm like, is that a fish? I'm thinking maybe some fish got hurt, or maybe a big fish tried to eat a smaller one and choked on him, and he's like dying on the surface. He can't expel it. But I'm looking, I'm like, and I keep seeing it would come up. It was kind of circular, and then it would go under. And then a minute later, it would come up a tiny bit closer and go under. And I'm like, what am I looking at? And it's getting a little more and more light out, and I can see now that it's hairy, and it's like a reddish brown color, like a dark reddish brown. So I'm like, oh, it's a muskrat. And then it gets a tiny bit closer and still pretty far. I'm like, nah, it's too big to be a muskrat. I'm like, it's a beaver. And it was about the color of a beaver, by the way. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, that's not a beaver. The portion I saw was the size of a beaver. Okay. But it turned out that was a head, or the top of the head. Okay. And so I'm looking, I'm like, is that a head? And it was like working its way towards me, and it would be at the surface for a second, and then it would go under, and it would come up a little closer, like I said, like a minute later or something like that. Okay. And so I started seeing more of it. Oh, in retrospect, I realized that this thing must have been eating crayfish. It was like diving down, catching crayfish, eating them, possibly eating them underwater. I don't know if that's possible, but coming back up, breathing, and then going back under. So I started seeing more of it. I started seeing like the head, which was like I said, like a hemisphere, and then like a dark part of like a body when it came to the surface, and then parts behind it. And I started to see, it looked like they were legs. And I'm like, is that a deer? And I'm like, no, because the deer has like, that almost like Loch Ness head and neck, if you think of them swimming and the body's on the surface. And I'm like, it looked like the color of an Irish setter, but big. It was like at least as big as an Irish setter. What I saw, it could have been foreshortened and looked like it was at least 5 feet long. And then I start realizing I'm looking at legs in the back part. Like you get the head, which looks biggest, then some body and legs. And the weird part was the legs were moving together. Like when you see somebody in those mermaid costumes, So the thing's legs were moving together. Like it's not like a person's where there was flutter kicking or the frog kick or anything like that. So when it would go under, you would see the legs move together and it would go under again. And I'm like, what the heck am I looking at? Like I had no idea. Okay. And it was like, and by the way, so if it's ever shown on film, one of these things swimming and the legs are moving together, you're going to say Max was right. Okay. Okay. So what happens is at this point, I don't know how far away this thing was, maybe 80 feet, 100 feet. I really couldn't tell you, but I wanted to see more of it because I was like perplexed as to what it was, So I figured, let me stand up. I think I tried to do this, and just as it submerged, or I was or before it came up again, I was trying to time it, So I wanted to go back up the hill, like back up the hill on the rocks, higher up, so I could get a higher perspective on it because I was close to like water level, down there. Yeah. I wanted to high up so I could see down on it, so I could see it better. So as I do this, it was apparently coming to surface right then, and I like dislodged some of the rocks, and they went like, they trickled down. Right. Yeah. And this thing must have heard me. I don't think it knew I was there the entire time because I wasn't making a sound. I was sitting on a bucket and I'm just like staring, like what am I looking at here? And then all of a sudden there was this disturbance, and it went like, and it went to dive under. And as it went to dive under, I saw plain as day, and at this point it was maybe 50 feet away. I saw its left shoulder, its left upper arm, its left forearm. All of this, okay, like here, broke the water, like the water was right here, like that. Okay, cut across like that. And it was muscular and human looking, like bodybuilder looking, okay, but big, and it was soaked obviously with water, and it had this long, thick, reddish brown hair that was hanging down and clinging to it. And I was looking right at it, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, is that an orangutan? Like, what am I looking at? Like this. And I had no knowledge of Bigfoot back then or anything like that. Okay, I mean, I might have seen a Patterson film, and like dismissed it on TV or whatever and stuff like that. But so it never dawned on me until many years later that it was actual Bigfoot. And it went like this, and then it went under like that, and then it was swimming fast. And let me tell you, this thing could swim powerfully underwater. And you saw its shadowy form and the water ripple as it was charging toward the pipe that separated the two, the two lakes, we'll call them. Okay? And I saw its shadow and the disturbance. The water went like this as it went through, like this. And it was probably bigger than 5 feet, honestly, at this point. It was sizable. It was big enough to disturb, like make the water go like that. And it went through real quick. And I'm like, holy crap. So I try running up the rocks, crossing the road, almost got hit. That was great. And everything. And then the other side, and I'm like, guys, look. I was calling it the hairy red thing. Okay, there's a big hairy red thing, and it's coming through right now. Look, you're gonna see it. But this thing was so fast that by the time I went up, almost got hit, crossed, went down, it was already through. And they're like standing there, and they're like, right. Yeah, whatever you say, beep. They were calling me names or whatever. Stuff like that. So I'm like, I'm telling you, I saw. And then just as I said that, off to the left there, where there was like the end of the land and trees, there were all these lily pads, which would be like prime bass country, okay, that grew out. I don't know how far from shore, 10 feet at least or something like that. Like it was all traveling around like the shoreline, and there was a disturbance in the lily pads. Something big was in there, and it was crashing through and moving through the lily pads, but you couldn't see it. If it was, and I'm assuming that was it, because if it was a big fish, why would it keep going like this and this and this for so long? I think it was coming up and using the lily pads to conceal itself, getting air, this type of thing. And like they were like, well, that's odd. But then it was gone, and nobody saw anything. So I talked about this just to show you there is some historical significance and stuff on a podcast, like I don't know, 6 months ago or something like that. Somebody through Instagram, and this guy wrote in. And I saved his texts and stuff. And he was like, Max, he goes, I believe you 100%. And he said that we used to go in the 70s and 80s to Candlewood and particularly to Squan's Pond. And we would camp there all the time. They would set up tents and stuff and camp there, he said. And he said we had 2 incidents like in the early 80s that stopped us from doing that. And he said that the first was that their campsite had been ransacked. They thought it was drug crazed hippies, but they didn't find any tracks, but their camp had been ripped to pieces, things upended, food torn up, tents destroyed, everything like that, and all. And he said, which turned them off about sticking around or coming back there. And he said the other incident took place on Squan's proper, and they were in a canoe, and they were on the far side of the lake by the woods, where there are no houses, where I told you it's all state land and stuff. And he said that they were canoeing along, not far from the shoreline, 15 feet or something like that. And all of a sudden they heard this crashing through the brush. There was a small clearing, and this huge buck, a big deer, I don't know if it was a whitetail or what, but exploded out of the woods, dove into the lake, ignoring them, swimming for its life, crossed the entire lake, went to the other side where there was, some houses, whatever, and woods, and kept going. Okay, this lake is a mile across one way and 2 the other the long way and stuff. But and then he said, hard on its heels, they heard something crashing through the trees, and it stopped when the buck jumped in the water. It didn't come it wasn't visible. It stopped dead like that, and then it started throwing stuff at them, small rocks, pieces of branches, stuff like that. It was tossing, lobbing things at their canoe. Okay, just kept throwing stuff and throwing stuff, and they were furious. And they're like, "Yo, we're in a canoe here. Cut it out!" This type of stuff, and it stopped. So now you got to think about it. He goes, based on what he goes, I know the causeway. I fished it. He goes, you're right. There are tons of crayfish in there. We used to do it and all this stuff. He goes, I believe you 100%. He goes, it never dawned on me. He goes, what was chasing this thing and was also throwing stuff at us, could have been a Bigfoot, but now it makes perfect sense to me. That's primate behavior. Chimps do it, monkeys poop at people and stuff. Bigfoot are notorious for throwing everything from pine cones to 200-pound rocks at people and stuff, But what would be able to chase a big deer that would scare a big deer, chase it enough, like if it was a person.
And keep up with it.
Yeah, you couldn't. I mean, I've been in those woods, and it is the roughest terrain you can imagine. Slopes, hilly, slippery, boulders sometimes the size of cottages, pine needles everywhere, trees thick as anything. Something was chasing this thing that scared it enough. It ran into the lake, but at the same time, whatever that was could throw stuff at people. Now, that implies a primate of some kind.
Some kind of intelligence, at least.
So, yeah, and there was even, I lost it. When I had it and I lost it, and would have put it in the book, but I had found like 100-year-old, I think it was from like 1918 or something like that, old like news article from like that lake or something, where they were saying how the heading said like fishermen spot hairy wild child in lake. That's what they called it. And then like Shannon LeGros from Into the Fray, she was telling me, she goes, well, that makes sense because before the term Bigfoot came along, that's what they used to call these things, especially small ones, a hairy wild child. So that's,
oh my gosh,
that's my story.
You have tons of amazing stories, and I wish we had more time because we are coming up to the top of the hour, unfortunately.
Well, uno momento, much like the police do a lineup whenever they're trying to pick out a suspect. Are any of these the suspect that you may have seen in the lake that day?
Since I, at the risk of setting myself up or something, since I only saw the top of its head, okay, and like a partially submerged body and legs, I honestly couldn't tell you. If you could show me in detail an arm, a shoulder, all that, I mean, but this thing was like Schwarzenegger. Honestly, and I got pretty big arms, okay, and this thing had much bigger guns than I do, and and it was a much better swimmer. I mean, you would not. I even thought at one point, I was like, man, I should have put a lure on and winged out there and snagged him.
That's
yes.
I couldn't.
And that's how you die. Okay.
That'd be the last thing you remember doing too.
Yeah, there's usually not just one, although this may have been a young one and it was like addicted to crawfish, like people are with potato chips, and
yeah.
So it was like a subadult or whatever, not listening to mom and dad, but mom and dad might have been close by, or whatever the case may be.
You never know if it wasn't a big one.
You couldn't stop one of these with a 12-pound test bass fishing outfit, something like that. I mean, best you'd piss them off.
This is the moment I'm like, hey guys, come look what I.
Yeah. Or worse, like, yeah. I mean, I fought. Yeah,
messing with Sasquatch.
I fought an alligator. I would much rather fight a gator than a Bigfoot.
I'll just keep my peace over here and not fight anything. I'm good with inmates.
Sometimes you have no choice.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, again. Where can we find you? I posted a couple of your links up. I know you have Facebook groups.
I don't give out my address. I'm sorry.
Stalkers like me might show up.
Where can we find you? Oh, well, I'll be at the, like Applebee's, this Friday.
Got a website where we can, kind of get your books, get some information.
Absolutely. Let's see. So the new book, Chronicizing Purgatory, is Amazon exclusive. It's not on my site yet because my guys are slackers. I've been overwhelmed. Sorry. But and the Paleo Galley hasn't been updated either. But if people go to either maxhawthorne.com or cronusrising.com. That takes you to the site, and there are some free downloads for some of the books, and you could pick and choose what you want. You got all different formats, audibles, and all sorts of other things there. There's a gallery you can check out of images free. If you want to see me on social media, it's Facebook. It's Max Hawthorne Author, and the same thing on Instagram. Just make sure you put Max Hawthorne Author. There's a lot of fake Max Hawthorns out there for some reason and stuff. I don't know, people trying to muddy the waters, or I don't know what, or maybe they think like that's gonna, like, I don't know, like beautiful women are gonna flock to them. It doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, I'm always happy. Oh, and there's a group called Monsters and Marine Mysteries. Max Hawthorne's Monsters. Yeah. On Facebook. Yeah, that's it. Wow.
That was rough.
Well, it was reading that couple pages. It kind of like, dried me out a little bit. I'm a little tired. So Rich, what did you think about that with the Bigfoot? I'm sorry, I know you guys got to go in a second.
Oh no, you're fine.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I mean, it's not out of the question to think, if they, to imagine if they can swim or not. I mean, orangutans and other breeds of apes, have been known to swim and go after fish and so forth and so on. So why not Sasquatches?
Shannon had told me in one episode she had, like, somebody had a boat with a glass bottom, supposedly, and supposedly a 9-footer swam under their boat and they saw it. Supposedly. I don't know. I couldn't find any reference to it in what. But that would be something to see. Although I don't know if I want to look down and see that, like, looking at you like, hi.
Yeah, right.
Come here. Like, imagine that. Fists come through the bottom, pull you through. It's like a scene from a Max Hawthorne novel, for God's sake. Nobody wants that. Sorry.
I think Rich just got some ideas for his next book there.
I'm going to say, you're giving me some material for my next book. So
there you go. See that?
All right, Jen, you want to take us home?
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you, Max, for showing up and giving us some amazing stories and reading a part of your book. I hope you see an increase in sales from this, because you really are truly a really good author. Richard, you as well. I absolutely love your Wild Eyed Southern Boys book.
Well, thank you.
What do we got going on with you?
Well, I'm I'm probably approaching somewhere in the neighborhood of 35,000 words for my third book in the Wild Eyed Southern Boys.
Woo-hoo!
And have you finished the Rougarou War yet, Jennifer?
Half not.
Okay, all right.
My
to
my to-be read list is as long as, I swear to God, it probably is between here and where you guys are at. I have so many to be read. It's ridiculous.
Audio.
I know, and I still can't get them. I'm having a hard time with. Right now, I'm doing Carl Meadows' book, and I'm going between reading and audio, and it's just I'll sit there and do audio while I'm rolling my cigarettes and stuff like that, and then I'll read when I want to ignore the fiance when I'm upstairs, and it's just
wait. You're rolling cigarettes?
Oh yeah, it's actually way cheaper than buying packs.
Wait, real cigarettes?
Yes.
Okay.
It's legal out here in Arizona anyways, but yes.
Oh. Imagine that.
Yeah.
We actually have very nice dispensaries where we can get pre-rolls. We don't roll that shit anymore. We don't need to.
I'm getting the good stuff. April 1st, 2023, when I'm retired from the Air Force.
Yep. Need to get you something.
I'm getting me a big fatty. I can't wait.
So, Jack, what have you been up to?
Well, me being the non-author, I have here recently got the pleasure of editing King Minos Book 2 for the one and only Angelus Maximus. We all know him as Angel Ramon.
Who could not be here today, which we miss, brother.
Take a little time off, getting ready to start up on Book 3.
Yep.
Now that one's canned, I'm taking a little bit of a little break too, along with him, and I'm going to go back and retroactively edit Book 1 and talk about a new experience. This has been a blast. I don't know why authors hate editing so much.
It sounds very interesting.
First. But yeah, that's pretty much it with me, just working and listening to audiobooks. And I'm like you, I'm kind of on Carl Meadows right at the moment. And If I didn't know that it was Carl Meadows that wrote that series, you could have told me it was Chris Philbrook, and I wouldn't have known any different.
Yep. Exactly. And I haven't even read any of Chris's books yet. I haven't had the chance. Yeah.
By the way, if you guys want me to, send me a link for your books, I'll be happy. I mean, my Monsters Marine Mysteries group would probably love them. So, I could post you guys in there and stuff, and maybe get you a couple extra readers.
Definitely, Richard. You're definitely up their alley. I'm not done with mine yet. Mine's still in the works, but I am closer to 30,000 words, so I'm pretty proud of myself. So,
mine are coming your way. So
we're getting there. But
I wrote that Purgatory book in 3 weeks.
Did you?
Yes. Wrote it, fully edited it, designed the cover.
Wow. See, and I work in pools, cleaning pools. That's my other job. That's why I have this phenomenal tan. But we're trying to get all this taken care of and getting the book done. So I'm really trying to make sure that it's good for my readers. It is something that I'd be somewhat interested in reading. So once I go through it after my first draft.
What's in it? What's it about?
Zombies.
Oh,
starting with what I know first.
Let me know. Like I said,
I'll move on
for you.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you.
I can't constantly crank out books left and right. And
I don't
people
know
start bothering me. When's the next book coming out? When's the next book coming out? 2 years. That's true. That's why I gave you a novella, because I can fast. Okay?
So shut up.
Yeah, but this way I hook you guys up. Keeps them happy. Stuff like that.
Well, awesome.
We're all
Thank you
human.
so much. Absolutely. So thank you again for coming on the show, and everybody from us here at Written Undead. We cannot thank you enough for watching. If it wouldn't be the Written Undead if we didn't have technical issues. So have a great day, everybody.
Peace out.
Bye-bye.